Hey guys, so a few months ago, I praised the Halloween Gambit as the most lethal opening to surprise your opponents after they respond with e5 on move 1, especially in rapid, blitz and bullet chess. However, I have discovered something much more safe and reliable that you can employ not only in blitz, but also in classical tournaments. So before I show you my new findings, which are full of traps, let me demonstrate the Halloween Gambit to those of you who are unfamiliar with it. So in the Halloween Gambit, white starts with e4, then black responds with e5, knight to f3, knight c6, and then instead of playing bishop c4, white plays knight c3, inviting black to enter into the 4 knights variation of the king's pawn game. The idea for white is to sacrifice the knight on e5 right away, so that if black takes, you now start chasing those knights with your pawns like this and this. The problem is that while this can be good in rapid, blitz or bullet, it's not reliable when it comes to serious classical games. So instead of taking this approach against the 4 knights variation, I want to show you something more reliable and simple that you are going to make as your new opening repertoire from today onwards. So you simply begin with e4, then black responds with e5, you play knight f3, knight c6, then we don't play bishop c4, we simply go knight c3, and let me turn on the Lichess database to show you the most common moves. Most black players play knight to f6 in this position, which introduces the 4 knights variation. Now spoiler alert, the development of our light squared bishop will always be delayed. So we are never going to think of playing an early bishop c4 or bishop b5. We replace bishop c4 with a very interesting and uncommon waiting move, pawn to a3. And this is the beginning of our traps, you guys. So stay tuned. There are 4 common responses that we are going to look at in this video. The first one is bishop c5, as you can see, the top played move, and the next one is d5, the second most played move, then d6 and bishop e7 at last. So we are going to move in that order. With pawn to a3, we are waiting to see what black is up to. For example, if they play bishop c5, the top played move, which is a long-term positional mistake, our simple idea is to sacrifice our knight on e5 like the way we do it in the Halloween Gambit. Now this time, we are not giving up a free piece, because pawn to d4 is our savior, which will make us take back our piece. Surprisingly enough, the top played move in this position, bishop takes d4, is a losing mistake. Watch. You first of all take that bishop, attacking the knight, so they're going to play knight c6, counter-attacking your queen, and this is the only position you would want to remember, you guys. You don't want to play queen back to d1 because that will delay your castling. You want to castle long in most of these lines. Again, you don't want to play queen d2 because that will block your dark squared bishop. So it's better you block your light squared bishop like this. Queen d3 is the key move to remember in this line. Given a chance, it opens a new opportunity to play queen g3 in the near future. So after queen d3, black may castle short, and this is when you want to castle long, but you first of all develop your dark squared bishop, which also provokes h6. There are so many good moves that you can consider, such as bishop h4, bishop f4 or bishop e3, but the best attacking move that I always want you guys to try out against your opponents is pawn to h4, giving up your bishop for free. And now you see another idea of putting your queen on d3, because if black takes your bishop, you take back, and let's say knight h7, you have queen d3, and my man, you are about to checkmate black either on h7 or on h8. Even if they don't play knight h7, and let's say they go pawn to d5, giving up their minor piece, well, this time you don't have queen h3, but at least you have queen g3, which was the main purpose of putting your queen on d3 back on move 8. And now black's knight is still under attack. So let's say if they take on e4, this is another tactical shot to remember. You don't want to play queen h4 in an effort to mate your opponent on h8, because tables may turn around. For example, queen h4 is very bad due to f5. When you give a check, your opponent will be able to rescue their king. The problem with queen h4 is that you don't have pawn to g6, which stops your opponent king from escaping, because black will simply take your queen and you are losing. So instead of playing queen to h4 right in this position, you better use your mind and play queen h2, and now checkmate is now unavoidable. For example, if they play f5 this time, you have pawn to g6. You can see that black can no longer take your queen, so this is clearly checkmate. start solving your chess puzzles, you guys, for you to start spotting these kinds of tactics easily. Anyways, back to our main position of the 4 knights game after black plays knight to f6. Well, once again, just remember to replace bishop c4 with pawn to a3, a waiting move. And again, most of your opponents will play bishop c5. And because of this error, you remember to sacrifice your knight on e5, and after knight takes, you go pawn to d4, double attacking the bishop and the knight. Again, if bishop takes d4, a common mistake, you take back. Knight c6, you play the key move queen d3 with the idea of playing queen g3 in the near future. Again, if black castles short, you want to castle long, that's why you play bishop g5 with tempo. h6, you don't retreat your dark squared bishop, you have pawn to h4, allowing them to take, which is a mistake by the way. But what if they don't take? And let's say they play an in-between move, knight to e5, counter-attacking your queen. Well, that's why you have queen g3. And now you are threatening to take on h6. Not to mention that you are also threatening to take the free knight on e5. If they play knight g6, well, this is completely losing for black because you have pawn to h5. Let them take your bishop because you can take back the knight on g6. And if fg, this is an opportunity where you can play bishop c4 because it's coming with check. And this file is covered by our rook. So if they play d5, taking on d5 with your knight is a good move. But the best move is to castle long. So you always want to look out for best moves. Black's pawn on d5 is pinned to the queen by our rook. And again, the d5 pawn is pinned to the king by our bishop. So this is funny. If bishop e6, you can now simply take on d5. If knight takes d5, you take with your pawn because there's a tactic you are up to. If bishop f7, you simply go queen h3, wanting to checkmate on h8. There's a problem. This is going to be mate in 6. For example, bishop takes d5, you take back with your rook, queen e7, rook d7. This is discovery check by our bishop. And after rook f7, it's queen h8 checkmate. So this is just a few lines you needed to know. If black doesn't take your dark squared bishop on g5 right in this position, and let's say they try to play knight e5. Anyways, there's a line where black doesn't castle short immediately after the following sequence of moves: knight takes e5, knight takes, pawn to d4, bishop takes, queen takes d4, knight c6, then you go queen d3. We saw that the top played move is castle short in this position, but there are times when your opponents will respond with pawn to d6. Once again, you want to castle long as quickly as you can, so that's why you play bishop g5. If pawn to h6, this time you don't have pawn to h4 because black hasn't castled short, so you need to play bishop h4. You can see they always play pawn to g5. This is okay for you because you haven't yet castled short, so they are just wasting their time. You play bishop g3. If they play bishop e6, now you simply castle long, and whatever they can do, queen d7, they want to castle long as well. Wait, since your king is safe and you are already ahead in development, you can begin your attack with knight d5 in this position. If they play knight takes d5, that's a blunder because you are going to win a piece. So they have to take with their bishop like this. And now you take with your pawn. If they go knight e5, taking the knight on e5 is a good move. But you always want to look for the best moves like queen b5 check. You also want to win the pawn on b7. If they go pawn to c6, blocking the check and also defending their b7 pawn, well, you just take the pawn. If bc, you go queen b4, attacking a new spot on d6. If they play knight d5, counter-attacking your queen, you go queen d2. It looks like we are just having a normal game, but as you were maneuvering your pieces, you were leaving black's position to be somewhat weak. Look at all these highlighted squares. For example, if they castle short, you can go pawn to h4. Imagine if you are playing this position in a classical tournament. This is a must win for you guys. And Stockfish says position is already plus 5.0 in favor of white. So this is a decisive win for white. Alright. So after achieving the 4 knights variation, and then we play a3, bishop c5 by black, knight takes, and pawn to d4. What if black plays bishop d6, the second most played move in this position? Well, this is a very funny line to learn, you guys. You can simply go pawn to f4. If they play knight g6, look at this. You create another fork. If bishop e7, taking on f6 is good, but pawn to f5 is best. If they play knight f8, now this is when you can take on f6. If bishop takes, now you go knight d5. You could have played anything else like bishop f4, bishop c4, etc. But you always want to be the one attacking, putting more pressure on your opponent, provoking them to make lots of mistakes. For example, if they play bishop d6, the top played move, now you go queen e2 check. That was the idea. If they play bishop e7 blocking the check, now you go pawn to f6. You can see all these ideas flowing the more you keep on attacking. They can't take back because of mate in 1. See that the bishop is pinned to the king and our knight is also covering the d7 square, so this is kind of smoother checkmate. That's why you just keep on attacking, provoking black to make lots of mistakes. So once again, if black takes back your pawn on f6, you just remember to go knight d5, because if d6 you have queen e2 check. And by the way, if pawn to c6, you also have queen e2 check. They have to block with their bishop. Once again, you go pawn to f6. Yeah, they can take your knight this time, but you don't even have to take the bishop because you can take a free pawn first, double attacking the rook and the knight, so that if rook g8, you take the knight with check. And let's say if king takes f8, you develop your dark squared bishop with tempo, that's check. They have to go back, and this is when you can castle long. Look at black's terrible position. So in most cases, you are going to be the one emerging with a better pawn structure. With this rare opening, you guys, so beautiful to learn. Anyways, again, after playing pawn to d4, then black plays bishop d6 instead of taking. Well, you don't take back. That's only a good move. You need to play the best move, pawn to f4. And we saw what happens if black plays knight g6. But what if they play knight c6? Well, you go pawn to e5. If bishop e7, this time you don't have pawn to f5 because there is no knight on g6. So you just simply take the knight. If bishop takes, again this time you don't have knight d5 because black can easily castle long and your knight will look useless on d5. So you simply save your pawn like this. It was being attacked twice. If knight e7, you go knight e4. You want to play actively, attacking black's bishop on f6. If knight f5, you develop your light squared bishop and on the next move you castle short. So again, you can see how simple this opening is to learn, you guys. And by the way, you can head to my website www.KaspaChess.com. I have a new feature on my website where you can become our partner by promoting our courses and earn 40% commission. You don't have to be my student to do this. All you need to do is to visit my website and click the promote us and earn button to register for my partnership program and start earning some passive income. Not to mention that you can also check out my new Italian opening course, which is the Italian opening Gioco Pianissimo, that I highly recommend, especially for beginners and intermediate level players. By the way, even coaches and advanced players, because there are some new lines that you may add to your already existing Gioco Pianissimo repertoire. Alright, so now enough of the bishop c5 response. Let's look at what else black can do against our new 4 knights variation. So you begin with e4, black plays e5, then knight to f3, knight c6, and instead of bishop c4, remember, we play knight c3. This invites black to play knight to f6, which is the 4 knights game. So again, we'll always forget about our light squared bishop's development and replace this with pawn to a3, a prophylactic move, waiting to see what black is up to first. We saw what to do if black plays bishop c5, because that gives us chance to sacrifice our knight on e5 and later on fork black's pieces with pawn to d4. But here comes the challenging part. What if black plays pawn to d5 instead of playing bishop c5? Well, the only thing that I want you to remember in this position is to simplify the game, KISS. Once again, we don't want to develop our light squared bishop on b5 like what most people do, even though that's a good move, but you will see why. So you just go ahead and take on d5, they are going to take back, and once again, you don't play bishop b5. Why? Because it's very drawish and oftentimes leads to positions where you have to exchange queens right away, which is not my thing. I like my queen. So forget about the development of your light squared bishop once again. Just go pawn to d4. Let them take your knight on c3 because you can take back with your b pawn, which is good by the way. If e takes d4, you can rebuild your pawn structure like this, and I like the fact that I have an open b2, which is good. For example, if bishop g4, pinning my knight to the queen, and also over attacking my d4 pawn. I have bishop e3 defending that. If bishop takes f3, well, I can take back on f3 with my queen. By the way, it looks like I just left my d4 pawn for nothing. The truth is, knight takes d4 is a terrible blunder by black because I can just take back the knight. If queen takes, yep, attacking my rook, I can just go bishop b5 check, an intermediate move, and if pawn to c6, I have this tactical shot which is developed over time after solving a number of puzzles, starting with bishop takes c6 check, b takes c6 and queen takes c6 check. So black still has no time to take my rook on a1. If king e7, I have to be very careful. I just need to castle shot. Now my rook on a1 is automatically defended and I'm attacking black's rook on a8. If they play rook d8, a reasonable move, well, this will be met in two after. Rook a e1 check, queen e5 or whatever, then rook takes e5, that's checkmate. So again, after you play pawn to a3 against a 4 knights game, and instead of bishop c5, black plays d5, you just remember not to do anything with your light squared bishop and simply take on d5 with your e-pawn. If knight takes d5, you go pawn to d4. Just to simplify the game, we already saw what can happen if knight takes c3, but what if black plays e takes d4 right away? Well, you don't take black's knight on d5, you want to oversimplify the game. Knight takes d4 looks more natural and that's what you should play. If knight takes d4 by black, you simply take back with your queen. If knight takes c3, remember you don't want to exchange queens right in the opening stage. So you save your queen like this, and next you are ready to play bishop d2 and castle long. This will be good for your eyeballs and your eyebrows. Anyways, again after e takes d5 and knight takes, pawn to d4, e takes d4 and knight takes d4. If black doesn't take your knight on d4 and instead play an in-between move knight takes c3, noticing that your knight is attacked twice by black, you simply take with your b pawn so that if knight takes d4, you fix your pawns like this. Once again, you have an open b2 square for your dark squared bishop. And let's say bishop d6 by black, you can simply go bishop c4 this time. I mean, it's late in the game and this is okay. If castle short, you castle short. Queen h4, they want to mate you, so you go pawn to g3, that's fine. This attacks the queen. If queen f6, you go bishop d5. At worst, you want to fianchetto your light squared bishop like this. That's the whole idea, by the way. If black plays bishop h3, if you want, you can retreat your bishop, that's okay, but you can be creative like this. Bishop takes b7. If bishop takes, you take the rook. It's up to black to trade bishops as well and simplify the game, that's fine. But if bishop h3, you can retreat your bishop. Once again, your bishop on g2 is the most powerful piece on the board, so black has to take it. You take back with your queen, and next you are planning to go queen f3, provided you don't hang your pawn. That's why you need to start with pawn to c3 first, queen f3, and bishop e3. We've looked at the bishop c5 response and also the pawn to d5 response. But this time, what if black plays pawn to d6? Let me show you what I mean. After e4, e5, knight to f3, knight c6. Again, instead of bishop c4, we go knight c3, inviting the 4 knights game. Well, once again, you don't forget to play your waiting move, pawn to a3, waiting to see if black wants to play bishop c5, after which you just take on e5, or maybe pawn to d5, after which you just take right away, or d6 this time. See, pawn to d6 and bishop e7 are prophylactic moves that can be tried by black with the idea of forking your pieces. E.g., if you carelessly play bishop c4, remember we said you need to forget about bishop c4 in our 4 knights variation. Well, this is good, but not objectively the best, because you don't want to be the one to be forked by black. E.g., after knight takes e4 and knight takes, because black can play pawn to d5, double attacking your bishop and your knight. So this is not really what you want. That's why instead of playing bishop c4, you simply go pawn to d4 right away. Again, if e takes d4, you can simply take back. If knight takes d4, you're going to take back with your queen. If bishop e7, black trying to play solidly, you can just go bishop e2. You want to castle long and also preventing bishop g4. These are just logical moves. Castle short by black, you castle short. And now the moves that you're thinking of is pawn to h3, bishop e3, and most importantly, pawn to f4. Then from here, you just continue playing normal chess. Alright, So instead of pawn to d6, what if black plays bishop e7? You know, after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, knight c3, knight f6, the 4 knights came again, pawn to a3, black plays bishop e7 instead of pawn to d6. Well, once again, if you rush to play our prohibited move bishop c4, you will run into this common folk where you will need to take back and allow black to double attack your pieces like this, which is not good. You don't want to be in this situation, so just forget about developing your light squared bishop in our system or in our prep. So instead of bishop c4, you go pawn to d4 once again, just like what we did in the d6 line. By the way, if pawn to d6 here, you can just expand your pawn like this. Now you have a very strong center with lots of initiative. For example, knight b8, you can just go pawn to h3, preventing bishop g4 or knight g4, whatever. If they castle short, whatever you can do as long as it's making sense is okay. For example, bishop e2, let's say pawn to c6. Well, you can just castle short. If they take, you don't take back with your knight because you're going to lose your e4 pawn. So you take back with your pawn, and I like it when my pawn is sitting on d5 because that covers the c6 square and the e6 square. So that's very good. And from here, it's not that easy for you to lose. You can develop your dark squared bishop here, or simply exchange it with the knight so that if black takes now, his bishop is misplaced. You won't have to worry about the d5 pawn anymore because black doesn't have a knight and it's chess at the end of the day. Anyways, so after bishop e7, you remember to go d4 immediately. If black doesn't play pawn to d6 this time, and let's say they just take on d4, you can just take back. If knight takes, you're going to take back with your queen. If castle short, you have so many good moves to play. For example, h3, bishop e3, and even bishop c4 this time because black has already castled short. So you can only consider to play bishop c4 if black has already castled short. That's fine. But what I like doing is simplify the game like this. If pawn takes, I don't want to exchange queens, so I go bishop d3. This also provokes the bishop g4 weakness by black, and let's see how weak this move can be. For example, after bishop g4, you simply go pawn to f3. If bishop e6, it's up to you to castle short or to develop your dark squared bishop even better. If pawn to c5, just a random move, you go queen e2. And again, it's up to you to decide where you want to castle, either long or short. Now, before I end this video, I would love to show you other possible sidelines that your opponents may play if they don't enter into your 4 knights game. For example, after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and knight c3, which is the 3 knights opening, instead of black playing knight to f6, entering into the 4 knights variation, which is what we have been looking at. What if black plays something else like bishop c5 and maybe try to take you out of the book? Once again, whenever you see bishop c5 in the 3 knights opening or in the 4 knights variation, just know that you have an option to take on e5, which is what you want. If knight takes e5 by black, you play d4, double attacking the bishop and the knight. If bishop takes d4, you take back with your queen. If bishop d6, see, this time you don't have pawn to f4 because black's knight can easily escape from Sobibor after knight c6 and knight b8. I mean, there is no knight on f6 this time, so you're not going to fork anything. So that's why you just simply take on e5. If bishop takes, you go queen f3. By the way, I don't like what most white players do in this position. Bishop c4 or bishop d3. Yeah, these are moves, but you're allowing black to double up your pawns. This won't be a losing mistake, but I just don't like having doubled isolated pawns. So that's why I think queen f3 in this position qualifies, because if bishop takes c3, I can take back with my queen. And if black plays knight to f6, well, I can simply go bishop f4, trying to keep it so simple. If they don't take my bishop, by the way, when your queen is on f3, you need to be very careful. After pawn to d6, black just paved way for his light squared bishop. So if you carelessly castle long, they'll play bishop g4, pinning your queen to the rook. And this is how white players normally lose these types of games. So you needed to be aware of this. If pawn to d6, instead of castling long, just trade your bishops and then put your queen to safety. Queen g3 aims at capturing on g7, so they'll castle short. And now you have an option to take on e5 or simply play pawn to h3 or even bishop d3, which I like, by the way. If queen e7, you simply castle short and continue playing as highlighted. You have pawn to h3. In the near future, you can play pawn to f4, a beautiful pawn break, and so this will be a great game for you once again. Let's go back a little bit, where black doesn't play bishop c5 in this position or knight to f6, but instead play pawn to d6, another sideline move. So this is not a 4 knights game once again, but remember, we still don't want to develop our light squad bishop very early. The move is pawn to d4 once again. If e takes d4, we simplify the game like this. If knight takes, we'll take back with the queen. If knight to f6, you develop your dark squad bishop with tempo. You want to castle long at best because of this misplaced pawn, which is blocking black's dark squad bishop. So castling long is good in this position. If bishop e7, you can go queen d2 or bishop b5. I mean, it's the flexibility in this opening for me, you guys, as long as you know where the pieces go. So let's say bishop d7. You can even castle short. They castle short, you go knight takes c6, simplifying the game, leaving them with doubled pawns along the c file, which is good for your eyeballs. So in most of these games, you'll be playing queen d3 with the idea of putting your queen on g3 before playing pawn to f4. This is very good for you and a very simple opening to play. Alright you guys, now before I end this video, let me just show you how Magnus punished his opponent using our opening prep that I've been showing you in this video. So again, you start with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, knight c3, and once again we see the 4 knights game. This time we are not going to sacrifice our knight on e5 right away. We are simply going to play pawn to a3. Now let me say something interesting about this opening, you guys. When Magnus Carlsen was 11 years old, he played this opening against a 2242 rated chess player, Samsa, in 2002, and he actually won a very great game. So pawn to a3 here is a prophylactic move, or a waiting move, waiting to see what black is up to before you show your cards. Now in this position, you guys, bishop c5 is the top played move, after which I'm sure that Magnus would have played knight takes e5, temporarily sacrificing his knight, so that after knight takes, now he can go d4, trying to force black to give up his bishop pair very early. If they don't, now here comes f4. And you just keep on expanding your pawns. Surely black is going to lose a piece. But hey, this didn't happen in the game that was played between Magnus and Samsa. Carlsen's opponent didn't play bishop c5. He played pawn to g6. But once again, you guys, try to guess the move that Magnus played in this position. Once again, Magnus unleashed this unexpected move, you guys. Knight takes e5, just like what we do in the Halloween Gambit. So you can see that these are not just dubious moves. Knight c6 was played, and then pawn to d5. You see, Magnus just kept on pushing his center pawns to gain more central space. Again d6 to start controlling the d6 square like that. The simple idea is to go queen e2 check and win back a piece. So this time, instead of black playing queen b6, they played queen f6, double attacking the d6 pawn, but Magnus still played knight b5, defending the pawn and also intending to go knight c7 check and win the rook on a8. Black played knight a6. Here Magnus just continued with bishop c4, and after bishop h6, castle short. So at the cost of a piece, you develop your pieces very quickly, get initiative, and try to put more pressure on your opponent. For example, here it is even very difficult for black to defend knight f5, but here you can just win black's queen on f6 like this, and the game is over. Anyways, alright you guys, I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If at all you did, consider giving it a thumbs up and do subscribe to my channel if at all you haven't already. And hey, remember to visit my website www.KaspaChess.com and purchase my new Italian course, which is the Italian opening Gioco Pianissimo, suitable for players of all ratings, which I explained clearly in simple terms, and I hope you will appreciate me later. Thank you for watching this video once again. Until next time, bye bye.